Hello guys, welcome to Hankins Custom Rifles, Hank's Precision Gun Parts, another episode of Hank's TV. Today is Friday, April 26th. It's 5:30 in the afternoon. Everybody's gone home from the shop. We've had a busy week, a busy day, and it is Friday night, so I'm going to try to do another video for you guys. So last week, this is how this video got started. We're going to do tonight. Last week, we were at the muzzleloader shoot. And one of the competitors that came down, Jerry Cressy, he was a very nice guy, come down from New Jersey, I believe. And we was talking about his gun, and he said he had to shoot at least 100 grains of powder because he cut his chamber too deep. Well, 100 grains of powder is okay if you're shooting 48.95 and a 325 grain bullet, which I do believe that's what he was shooting. But he wanted the option to be able to shoot a 275 grain bullet with 41.98, and in order to do that, you have to drop the powder charge down to 78 grains is what I call max. So what he had done is he's drilled his chamber out too deep in order to do that, because his bullet's falling down into the chamber. You guys might understand what I'm talking about. It'd fall down out of the barrel, get into the chamber, rattle around, could sit in there sideways, cause a catastrophic failure when you shoot the bullet out, because it's not going to come out. It's going to try to go up through there sideways. So he asked me how he could fix that, and I said, well, you just have to set the barrel back a little bit. And we got to talking about how you do that, and he didn't know how to pick up on the threads that were already there, because he didn't want to cut off the whole tenon. You're going to lose almost an inch. So in reality, he could probably just cut off 3/8. I'm thinking 3/8 is going to be plenty for him to go up in there, cut 3/8 off, set it back 3/8 of an inch, rethread the barrel, put it back on his action. He'll be ready to go. But he didn't know how to pick up the threads after they've already been cut and taken out of the machine. So we're going to show you how to do that today, and I'm going to do it on this die blank. So a couple weeks ago, a month ago or so, I ran some die bodies on my Mazak machine. Out of necessity, I needed one, didn't have any, couldn't get one on the internet, what I wanted, so I just set up the machine and I made some. So I'll have those in stock and on the website one of these days if I ever get them completely finished. I got them done enough for me to use, so that's all my main concern was. So we have a standard 7/8 14 thread pitch die body. This is one of the first ones that come off the machine when I was setting it up, and I believe the point of my threading tool broke, okay, because we've got a good looking thread on the die body, but I cannot get the go gauge to go on it. So I just threw this in the trash. It's not really worth it money wise. This thing's only going to be a $30 or $40 part. It's not worth it money-wise or time-wise. I should say time-wise is more important than anything when you're in the shop, to set it up in the machine and manually come in and pick up the threads and recut it to meet the specifications on the go and the no-go gauges. But since we need a video and I don't have a barrel that's got threads on it that I need to pick up and cut any deeper or move back any farther or to modify any at all, I dug this out of the garbage, and we're going to set this up in the machine. I'll show you guys how to set it up and pick up on the threads, and we'll cut them to spec. So we're going to go down to the lathe now and set this up in the machine, and we'll get this job done for y'all tonight. Okay, so we're down here at the machine, and I'm just going to do this in a 3-jaw chuck today, because we don't need to put it in a 4-jaw. We don't need to indicate it in. I've got some counter bore in these 3 jaws. I've got a little counter bored spot that's going to hold this pretty much perfectly true, concentric to the center of the lathe, so we don't need to waste a bunch of time indicating this in. It would be different if we were doing a gun barrel. It would need to be indicated in just like it would be if it's brand new. So remember that this is not a gun barrel. We're not trying to hold any special tight, you know, 2/10 of a thousandths tolerance or nothing like this on here. So I'm just going to put this just barely inside these 3 jaws because I have a step in there, and that's going to hold that pretty much straight, sticks out straight. See how we're doing there, fellas? That's sticking straight out, and we're going to have to support it. I've seen guys do work on YouTube and they've got their gun barrel sticking way out here and it's not supported, and they're cutting threads and it's chattering and making all kinds of noise, jumping up and down on their tool holder. That's a very bad thing to do. You always want your work as close to the chuck as you can possibly get it whenever possible. On this part here, I could put it in a 4-jaw chuck, or I could even put it in this 3-jaw and push it way up in the chuck like this and do it. But then we're going to be threading up close to the chuck, and we don't really need to do that. We could pull it out far enough and give you some room. That would probably hold it. That's probably out there far enough to hold it. If you guys can see what we've got here. I don't know if that tool holder's in the way or not. I don't think so. But we're going to put it just inside these 3 jaws, and I've got this counter board in there about maybe 3/16 of an inch deep. I use this thing all the time. That little counter board comes in handy so much for me on some parts. If you just need to face something off quick and easy, just stick it in there and face it off, or whatever you're doing. So anyway, we're going to slide the tailstock up until it hits our part, which is a die body. I'm going to put the threading tool on. I'm going to blow it off first. Blow this off. We did a lot of work on this lathe today, so it's kind of dirty and oily, and I did wipe it off just a little bit before we started the video. I'm going to lock that down in place, and now I got to make sure that I've got enough room for my threading tool to go all the way in. So we need to come back here, okay, and now I'm going to crank out my tailstock until it gets in there. I'm going to lock it down on the table. Okay, we've got that locked down good. That looks good to me. We're going to put it in gear. Okay, so what we got to do now is we're going to set our compound at about a 45-degree angle. I've seen some other guys do a video on this, or another guy do a video on how to pick up the threads, and he set his completely 90 degrees. Most of the time I like to keep my compound on 45, just because if I'm doing any kind of a chamfer or whatever, 45 is always a nice chamfer. So we leave it set on 45 most of the time here. So I'm going to show you guys how to do it sitting on 45 degrees. Now we need to line up our threading tool. And I'm going to show you all an easy way to do this. We're going to loosen that nut so that our tool can float around. And I know a lot of people have a fishtail gauge, and I've got one sitting over on the other machine. I hardly ever use it. If you want this thing to be perfectly straight, all you have to do is come in here to the face of your chuck. You're going to roll this up there, and you can see this moving as you roll it in. And when that gets perfectly straight with that chuck, and I can see it with my eyes, when that's straight with the chuck, you can lock it down. So I would like to be able to bring you guys in here, and I'm going to try to do that. I'm going to take the camera off the tripod, so be prepared for stuff to get a little shaky. But we're going to bring you in and show you what I mean about getting this square with the chuck. Okay, so I've brought this camera down. I've got it sitting right on top of my tool post here, and I've exaggerated again the gap between the threading tool and the face of the chuck. And as I roll this carriage in, you guys can see this gap closing up. when it's closed up perfectly straight, then you have a perfectly straight threading tool. Okay, so now I'm going to pull the camera away. Didn't mean to drop it on you guys, but I'm going to pull the camera away and I'm going to lock it down in place. Okay, so now I'm going to take a good look at it, better than I could see through the camera, and we're going to get this threading tool perfectly straight with the face of that chuck, and that's going to tell me that my threading tool is perfectly straight. And I'm telling you guys, this is a whole lot easier and more accurate than doing it with that fishtail gauge. Because when you're trying to use the fishtail gauge, most of you guys know, you're trying to hold that gauge in your thread tool. You're trying to put that point of that thread, that 60-degree angle tapered, into the fishtail gauge. Then you're trying to hold the fishtail gauge on your surface that's hopefully straight. And this is easier. I mean, I'll tell you, this is the way we've done it forever. And it works really good. So now that we have changed this to 45 degrees, I no longer have enough room to get down to the end of my threads. So I'm going to have to loosen this, crank it back down a little bit. We got to get to the end of the part. That's more than enough. Right there. Lock it back down, get a good grip. Another good bite. All right. So I'll bring you around here and show you what we've got one more time. So this is our setup now, guys. We've got our die blank in here that we're going to pick up on the threads. We've got our threading tool sitting right here. We've got enough room to clear the threads. And now we're going to pick up these threads. I'll show you how to do that. Okay, I don't know how well you guys can see this, but we've got the machine set up now to cut 14 threads per inch. Everybody's machine is different. You've got a series of handles, all kinds of stuff here. You pick out your pattern that you want, 14 threads per inch. You set it up, set your gearbox and all that stuff. If you have a lathe at home, you should know how to set up your lathe. It's going to be different than mine. But once you set that up, you're good to go. We're going to pick a speed that we can cut threads on. And I'm going to say, let's go 230 RPM. So we need over here, J, KM. Let's see how fast that goes. That's a little too slow, so let's jump it up 1 to HLM. There we go. I think we can probably cut threads like that. We've got plenty of room right here to get out of it before we crash in over here. We should not have any problems doing that. So what we're going to do now is we want to make sure that our point of our threading tool will clear these threads. We can roll this back and forth and we're not hitting our threads. We're going to turn the machine on. We're going to engage our threading process. So you're going to engage a half nut. And when the tool gets down in here somewhere, you're going to shut the machine off. You want to stop it right there. And then we're going to line up on the threads. Alright, so we're right there. We just stopped it. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look at it really good and see where we're at. We're going to crank it in. I'm going to use my compound to line the threading tool up with the threads. And you really need to be able to see this really good, because if you're off a little bit when you start cutting the threads, it's not going to work. If you're off too much before you get the thread down to where you want it, it'll be too big, or too small I should say. So I like that right there. That looks good to me. I'm going to bring you in with the camera again and show you what I've done. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and set my 0 on the digital readout so we can come back to that number. If you don't have a digital readout, you could set the 0 on your dials. Would work the same way, but the digital readout works a whole lot better. So now let's come in and I'll show you what we've done. Okay, I don't know how well you can see this, but when you're threading down through there and your tool is clearance the part, so the tool is out here and you're threading down through there, and let's say it stops, and I'll just set this up again so you guys can see what's going on. So let's say it comes in over here and you crank this in, and you see the point of your threading tool is almost on the very top of the thread. Well, you can't cut threads there. You're just going to tear it all up and cut a whole bunch of extra threads. So what we're going to do is, on this case, I'm going to pull this compound backwards. At the same time, it's moving that center of that threading tool, the point of that tool, to the center of the thread. The lowest, the valley in the thread there. So when you think you've got it right, that's when you're going to lock it down and set your 0. So I'm going to show you this again. So we're going to pull it out, we're going to push it off, we're going to roll it in, and it's very hard to see looking through this camera. So you can see now that the point of that tool is on the peak of the thread. We want to either, you could roll it backwards this way until it lines up, or you could push it in forward until it lines up. It doesn't really matter, whatever you want to do. Just have to get it lined up. See, now that's hitting on the right hand side. I'm going to screw it in just a little more. Going to screw it in a little more that way. That was too much, so we're going to come out, we're going to come in until we've got it lined up. So there we go, fellas. It's lined up. I'm going to set the camera back on the tripod, get my good eyes on it, and go from there. Okay, I did forget to tell you guys that when you stop the machine, I've got an emergency stop on this with a brake, so I will step on my foot pedal and stop the machine. That stops everything together. The spindle stops, the lead screw stops, everything stops. So that's where you want it to be at when you set your tool up. And you also want to make sure that you leave your half nut engaged. Don't take that half nut out of gear. Leave it engaged, or else it's not going to be in the right spot when you start your threads up again. So I'm going to back the camera up and we're going to get another start on this, and we're going to see where we're at. We've set our 0, and let's cut some threads. Okay guys, I wish I could bring you in a little better so you could get up here and see this, but I just don't have a camera set up that I can mount up high and look down in here. So if you have a lathe, you kind of know what I'm doing, so you're just going to have to follow along and imagine what's going on here. So we've set our 0 on the readout. So I'm going to come over here. We're going to line up on one of these threads. We're going to come in, and when I touch that part, I should be up here on 0. There, we got a good 0 set. We're going to cut this, and 0 should be where the tool starts to touch the part. So we don't want to go straight to 0 the first time. We're going to back off some and cut it. Let's say just be on the safe side, back off 15 or 20 thousandths, whatever you guys feel comfortable with. If you want to back off a full 60 and make another pass, stop it in the middle, crank it in. Make sure you're still lined up in the center of your thread. That's safe too. It's always better to do it 2 or 3 times than to mess it up on the first try. So let's back this out. Let's come down here. We're going to go, let's see, to be on the safe side, let's start it at 56 thousandths. That's going to touch no threads. So we're going to come into 56 up here on the gauge, on the digital readout I should say, and we're going to come down here now. Turn the machine on. I did slow the machine down 1 speed. We are now running 230 on the RPM, so I just kind of felt like that 325 was a little fast for 14 threads per inch. If we were running 18, 20, 24 threads per inch, that would be fine, but at 14 it's moving across there pretty quick, so I did slow it down to 1 speed. That's another thing, you guys can set your speeds and feeds at whatever you're comfortable with. If it's a real fine thread, you can run a little faster RPM. If it's a coarse thread, that fast RPM is going to scoop that carriage across there really quick, and you don't have much time to think or react, and that's something you got to do. It just takes practice. So we're going to put a little thread cutting oil on here after we make this first pass. Okay, so I'm halfway through. I stepped on my emergency stop pedal. I'm going to crank it in here again. Look and see where it touches. Look at my readout, and we're off by 5 thousandths. So we're going to leave it at that. We're going to come back out. We're going to come back to the beginning. We're going to come in. We started at 56. I'm going to say let's go into where we've got 15 to go before we touch our part. I'm going to put a little thread cutting oil on here. Now this here is just tap magic. It always works really good for me. Alright, and now we're going to engage. We're going to run all the way down the part. We get to the end. We're going to disengage and withdraw at the same time. So it did take just a little bit of metal out of that root, the valley, because the valley was bad. That's where our thread went bad at. So we were at 15. This time we're going to go to 10. We're going to take another pass. Let's go to 10 if I can get it on there. There we go, 9.4, that's close enough to 10 for me. Engage. When you get to the end of your threads, you disengage and withdraw at the same time. Alright, so let's go back down. We're going to go back in now. We were at 10, let's go to 5. We'll take 5 thousandths of a cut, which is 2.5 per side. We are taking some material off now, so we're starting to see some material come out of there. Okay. We're going to go to 0 this time, which is where we thought we were at when we set this up on 0. And we're going to cut one more pass. Now we'll crank this out a little bit. We're going to move our tailstock out of the way. I'm going to blow this part off. And we're going to check it with a go gauge. So we've got a 7/8 14 thread go gauge. And it won't quite screw on there, so we need to take a little bit more. So now we're going to go back to like a negative number, and we're going to take some more out of there. We were at 0. We're going to go minus a little bit now. So let's go minus, I'm just going to go -4. It's 2.5 per side. We're going to put some more oil on here because I blew it all off. I don't believe that that was enough, so we're going to do another pass at -6. Now I'm going to blow all the oil off, and I'm going to sand the top of those threads with a piece of 240 grit sandpaper. Alright. Blow it off again. Let's see if the go gauge will go on here now. It's still a little tight. It will go on, but it's really not in spec because it should not have to be twisted to go on there. We are within 1/1000th of an inch of being right, fellas. So we're going to have to be careful now with this next cut because we don't want to go over. We want that go gauge to go on. We do not want the no-go gauge to go on. So we're going to cut this again. And I'm going to go back to the same number we were on before and just do like a spring pass. So let's go back to 6 and do a spring pass on here. That didn't hardly take anything, so I'm going to go to 7. Okay, I don't know if you guys heard me or not because I was not facing the camera, but that pass, that spring pass didn't hardly take anything off at 6 thousandths, so I'm going to go to 7. We'll take another 1,000th off each side, so we're really taking 2 off total. Okay, I'm going to blow the oil off again. Run over it with this sandpaper. We'll blow it off one more time. Okay, I don't know if you guys heard me or not, but when you get done, you always want to run a piece of sandpaper across the top of the thread. That just breaks off any of the little microscopic burrs that form up on there that could cause gulling, could cause your nut, your barrel, or your receiver or whatever to lock up on your part, and that's not good. So if you sand that off with some fine grit sandpaper, 240, 220, 400, whatever. I keep a couple pieces laying up here on top of my machine. So I've always got a piece of sandpaper that comes in handy. And let's see where we're at now. We're going to knock this out, slide this back. We're going to try the go gauge. If I can hold it on there straight. Okay, and the go gauge goes on. Rolls up there pretty good, all the way to the end of the die body. That's the way you want it to fit. You want it to just be able to spin on. You don't want to have to force it on and crank it up there. And then you have a no-go gauge, and we're going to try that one. Okay, so see, it's on almost full thread and it's getting tight and locking up. That's what you want. You don't want the no-go gauge to thread on to your part. Okay, we could probably make it go all the way up, but we don't want to. It could cause problems. It could lock up, could seize on us. Then our gauge is no good. So what we've got here is 0.828 and 825. So that's 0.003 difference between a no and a go gauge. Pretty much the same as a headspace gauge. You got 0.003 of room to for tolerances. So that's pretty much it there, fellas. That is done. We now have a usable die blank. If we needed to use this for something, it'll work. All right, so there it is. And that's how you pick up the threads on something that's already been threaded. So if you guys need to do that in the future, if you just want to cut off this much, you could cut that off, thread it on back. Now, we'd create a problem here because we've got a big cutout in here. That's another reason why you don't want to put those big cutouts in your gun barrels. I know a lot of guys do it. And Jerry even said he had put a cutout in there, a relief cut, but that'll be okay. It's not really the best way to do it. You shouldn't do it if it's at all possible, but it's not the end of the world. It's not going to kill the gun barrel. It's not going to scrap it. But try to learn how to cut threads without this big relief cut. The relief cut's put in here for a different reason. We don't need to go into that, but there's a relief cut in here for another reason. All right, that's pretty much it, fellas. We'll get back down there and finish this video up real quick, and I'll let you go for tonight. Okay, we're just going to finish this video up right here at the lathe. Go over a few things with you. I never wear gloves. I see these guys that wear these plastic surgical gloves. I don't know if it's because they don't want their fingers to get black or whatever, but this will wash right off in the shower. But that's not why. I don't care if my hands get black. I don't care if they're clean. I don't wear them for safety reasons. If you've got on a rubber latex glove and you're over here working and this spindle's turning 900, 1200 RPMs, whatever you got at 400 RPMs, okay? And that rubber latex gets caught on a burr and it snags and it pulls and it wraps around that part one time so fast that you can't get out of it. You think, oh, it's just a piece of latex, I can break that. No, you can't. You can't break it that fast. Your reactions ain't quick enough, okay? Drunk driver pulls out in front of you and you think you can brake fast enough, but you wind up hitting him anyway because your reactions ain't fast enough. Don't wear gloves when you're running these machines. You guys that want to wear gloves and keep your hands all pretty, get a different job profession and go in the office somewhere and just type on the computer, and then you can come out with manicured fingernails and your hands won't be cracked up and they'll be nice and pretty. But if you wear gloves running this machine, you won't have any hands for very long, because sooner or later it'll get you. It's never got me, but I've seen it happen in some of the factories that I've worked in. I've seen some pretty good injuries, and a lot of them are caused from people doing stupid stuff. Wearing gloves on a drill press, milling machine, that's a no, no, don't do it. Don't wear gloves on the lathe. You can't break them that fast. And take a pair of latex gloves, put one in your hand and pull on it and see if you can break it. Just pull on one finger and see if you can break it. See how far that thing will stretch before it breaks. Well, by that time, your finger's done wrapped up in there and you're trying to find the e-stop buttons, or you're screaming for help, and who knows, you might be working in the lathe, working in the shop late at night. It's 2 o'clock in the morning and you're out there making gun barrels or whatever you're doing. You get your hand all wound up in the machine, and the next thing you know, you're having to wake up the wife to take you to the hospital because your hand's all twisted up about 400 times before you could get the machine off. Or worse yet, just tears your arm completely out. It can do that. It happens. It happens, believe me. So don't do that. Don't wear gloves working on the machine. And another thing I'll tell you, the most important thing to me is these right here. If you can't see it, you can't work on it. So quality work comes from being able to see it. I can look at this part and see every little nick and ding, and I threw it in the scrap bucket so I can see a couple dings in the side of it. Does it hurt this for what it is? No. Am I going to try to sell it or use it? No. I'm going to throw it back in the scrap bucket. I just wanted to show you guys a quick and easy way and how to pick up these threads. So we got that done. The part's done. We picked up the threads. We got within the tolerances of where we want to be. So you guys can do that on any threads that you want. It'll work the same as it did on that part right there. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching it. I like making these videos. They're a little bit hard to make when you're all by yourself and you're trying to run a camera and do everything on the machine and talk about it at the same time you're doing it. I mean, I can do this stuff in my sleep, but when you talk about it, it gets a little bit harder because you got to talk about it in a way that everybody can understand, and not everybody uses the same lingo in the machine shop. Some people, I call this a tailstock. Some people call it something else. I call this a live center. Some other people call it something else. You know, this is a threading tool. Some people call it something else. But anyway, you all understand what I mean. So till the next video, give me a thumbs up if you like it. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Let me know what else you'd like to see in the shop here, and we'll see if we can't make it happen for you. And till next time, guys, we'll see you later.